Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. This is your host, Melanie Betts, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert. And I wanted to devote an entire episode relatively early in the podcast to one of my very favorite foods, chocolate. I am certainly a chocolate lover. I think my favorite kind of chocolate or form of chocolate is probably brownies, with a very close second being plain chocolate ice cream. I think plain chocolate ice cream is massively underrated. Of course, I'm all about a fancy mousse tracks or something like that, but plain chocolate is one of my favorites. So as you can tell, probably in the excitement in my voice, is that I do really love chocolate. And I wanted to talk a little bit about chocolate and kidney stones because I know that chocolate is so often demonized in the kidney stone world. And so I wanted for us to kind of dive in and understand a little bit about why that is and how you can totally, absolutely enjoy chocolate and still prevent kidney stones. So spoiler alert there, you can totally eat chocolate, but let's dive into that a little bit more. And let's start with, why is chocolate, quote, big air quotes here, bad for kidney stones? So when you Google what's good or bad for kidney stones, and I, for the record, hate those lists that say these foods are good for stones and these foods are bad for stones, because there is no single food on this earth that you can never have again if you have kidney stones. On the flip side, there's no food on this earth that you should be focusing in on and eating a ton of to prevent kidney stones, I suppose, other than generally fruits and vegetables, but that's a whole category of food, so that doesn't count. I really hate it because kidney stone nutrition, and honestly, nutrition for anything, is really all about balance and looking at your whole dietary pattern. It is never about 100% avoiding a certain food. Unless we're talking about a food allergy or celiac disease or something like that, there is nothing that you can't eat. It's all about learning how to build healthy meal patterns and building dietary patterns, basically, based on your 24-hour urine risk factors. So I wanted to definitely start that out with, I hate this idea that certain foods, chocolate included, is bad for stones, because as always, there is so much more to that, and it's just not that simple. It just isn't. Nutrition is not straightforward, especially for kidney stones, right? So all right, so back to chocolate. So chocolate is often on a, quote, bad list because of oxalate. So chocolate, especially dark chocolate, it does have a fair amount of oxalate in it. And that comes from cocoa. So cocoa powder itself has a fair amount of oxalate in it. So I looked up some numbers so I would have them fresh in my mind for this podcast. And I found that, to the best of my knowledge at least, 2 tablespoons of straight cocoa, like cocoa you might bake with, so this is the dry powdery stuff, has about 80-ish milligrams of oxalate in it. So that's a fair amount. But remember, that is in 2 entire tablespoons of straight cocoa. You're probably not going to eat straight cocoa. Can you imagine how icky and dry and disgusting that would make your mouth feel? No, that's not what we're doing here. That's not how we eat chocolate. We eat foods that have cocoa in it. And so foods that have cocoa in it are going to be higher in oxalate. And foods that have more cocoa directly in it are going to be higher in oxalate because of that cocoa, right? So some foods that are going to be higher in actual cocoa powder are things like dark chocolate, brownies, hot chocolate, the hot chocolate milk mix itself has cocoa in it, as well as sugar and other things to make it tasty. But that cocoa is really where that oxalate is coming from. So the next question is always about, well, what kind of chocolate is better? So there's a lot of things to consider, right? So dark chocolate definitely has the most oxalate in it. Again, the best estimate I could find, 1 ounce of dark chocolate, and this is going to definitely depend on the percentage of dark chocolate that you're eating, but generally 1 ounce of dark chocolate has around 65-ish milligrams of oxalate. when you compare that to milk chocolate, which definitely has a whole lot less cocoa in it. I found estimates anywhere between 5 to 30-ish milligrams of oxalate in 1 ounce of milk chocolate. Those estimates range significantly, probably because it's so difficult to measure oxalate. You're going to find different oxalate amounts for everything. That's one of the many reasons, actually, I don't advocate actually counting the amount of oxalate that you eat, because it would drive you absolutely batty and probably honestly isn't going to make that big of a difference. There's other things that I would much rather you spend your energy on, but that's for a whole nother podcast. So milk chocolate is going to have less than dark generally. And like I said, the estimates I found were anywhere between 5 to 30. And that's going to totally, again, depend on the amount of actual cocoa in that product, the percentage of cocoa even in that milk chocolate, right? There's going to be different percentages, different brands like Hershey's versus Cadbury versus Dove or whatever. Like all of them are going to have different recipes, which is why it's so difficult to know, especially in these foods made by companies, how much oxalate is in there, because they're just obviously going to have different recipes, and that's okay. That's how the world works. And then on the flip side of that, white chocolate is actually going to have 0 oxalate in it, because white chocolate isn't actually chocolate. It's just sugar, basically, and it doesn't have cocoa in it. Therefore, it doesn't have oxalate. So this information might lead you to think like, oh, well, dark chocolate has all that oxalate in it. I should probably eat white chocolate instead. And my answer to that is maybe not. So why not, right? And the answer comes down to there's so many different things to consider when it comes to kidney stone prevention, and we really need to kind of prioritize what matters most for you. The issue with choosing white chocolate all the time, or me saying like, yeah, white chocolate's fine, is that I don't want you to go eat a ton of white chocolate because it has a ton of sugar in it. And we know that sugar can be an issue for kidney stones, especially people who have uric acid stones or high urine calcium. So honestly, the answer really comes down to just enjoying what you enjoy. Like chocolate is not something that we should be eating a ton of anyway. You are not guaranteed not going to make a kidney stone because you ate a piece of chocolate. And that's certainly what these lists of yes and no foods or Dr. Google would certainly have you believe, is that, oh, chocolate's bad for stones, so if I eat a piece of chocolate, I'm going to make a kidney stone. And that's just simply not how it works. Again, we really have to back up and look at your entire dietary pattern. Oxalate can be an issue if you are eating a ton of these very high oxalate foods. If you are eating a ton of dark chocolate, plus binging on spinach smoothies, plus having almond butter all the time, and you're not getting in enough calcium, yes, I've definitely seen oxalate be an issue. But do I see oxalate be an issue when you have a piece of dark chocolate a day, or even like every single day having a piece of chocolate, even a brownie every single day, when it's part of a balanced meal pattern? No, absolutely not. And that's really what it comes down to, is looking at your whole pattern. And if you love chocolate, you can absolutely enjoy it. So I wanted to give you a little bit more guidance, because I know me saying like, hey, it's cool to eat chocolate is probably not the most helpful. So I wanted to dive into this a little bit further and say, breaking it up and looking at your urine, your 24-hour urine test, because we know that there is no single kidney stone diet that's right for everyone. Nutrition really has to be personalized to each person. So my first question when we're trying to figure out what kind of chocolate is best, how much chocolate you can have, and all those things is, do you even need to limit how much oxalate you're eating? So often, even people who have calcium oxalate kidney stones do not have high urine oxalate. More often than not, high urine calcium is what's really driving stone formation. It is not high urine oxalate. And that is one of the gazillion reasons why that 24-hour urine test is so important. We really got to look and see what's going on in that urine that's forming stones. And most of the time, honestly, it's not high oxalate. But we got to know that, right? If we don't have that test, we have no idea. I really don't have a lot of things to go on to give you guidance as to what you should be eating, or for you to figure out what you should be eating. So the first step is, do you even have high urine oxalate in the first place? You do not necessarily have high urine oxalate if you have calcium oxalate stones. So if you don't have high urine oxalate, then sure, go ahead and enjoy your chocolate. Enjoy it just like you would any other sweet. We shouldn't be eating a ton of it. If you were having like half of your food be chocolate or any other dessert, you'd probably feel pretty poopy anyway, right? You'd probably be very hungry because there's not a lot of fiber in there to keep you full, or protein. But go ahead and enjoy it as part of a healthy healthy meal pattern. If you do have high urine oxalate, then maybe we should think about that oxalate in that chocolate, especially if it's something that you really love and you wouldn't love to have it every day or a couple times a week. Then sure, we can work with that. I would say that especially if you're having the dark chocolate or things that have a lot of cocoa in them, like a brownie, which is, as I mentioned at the beginning, one of my personal favorites, then I would say just make sure that you have it with milk. That milk has tons of calcium in it, as we know, and that calcium is going to significantly reduce the amount of oxalate that gets absorbed from that chocolate that you're eating, whatever form of chocolate it is, whether it's cake or ice cream or whatever, right? So that milk is so important. It's honestly probably a good idea for everyone, just because we should be getting in those 3 servings of dairy, and most of us are not doing that anyway, but especially if you have high urine oxalate and you know that you're eating something on the higher oxalate end, like chocolate, then you really want to make sure you have a good calcium source to kind of significantly reduce the amount of oxalate that gets absorbed into your body, to stop that oxalate from ending up in your urine and raising your risk of stones. And honestly, like, milk goes really, really well with most chocolate things anyway, right? Like chocolate cake and milk, delicious. Chocolate chip cookie and milk. Basically, what's the point of eating a chocolate chip cookie if you can have a glass of milk, right? So good. So that's my advice based on your urine oxalate levels. And again, what's most important out of all of this is to make sure that it's balanced throughout the day. Honestly, for the vast majority of people, I'm a whole lot more concerned about the sugar that's coming along with whatever food you're eating that cocoa powder in, like in the ice cream or the cake or the cookies or the candy or whatever it is. Not saying that you can have zero sugar. That's definitely not the goal. But the key is to make sure that you're not having a ton of this added sugar, because when we have a ton of this added sugar, we can get into issues with both kidney stones as well as heart disease and some other things, right? So really it's more about looking at your whole dietary pattern. Can you incorporate chocolate into that balanced pattern throughout the day, or, when you're looking at food throughout the whole week? 100%. And if you love chocolate, then please go ahead and enjoy chocolate, because nutrition for stones, when we're thinking about these changes, this is really what we should be doing for the rest of our lives. So whatever changes we're making, we really need to think, like, is this something that I can do for the rest of my life? And honestly, for so many of us, what is life without chocolate? For me, it would be pretty sad. And that's totally okay if you feel the same way. So what I hope that you get from this is that I hope that you feel more comfortable eating chocolate if that is something that you've removed from your life so far. And hopefully this gave you some tips for how to incorporate it a bit more safely if you do have that high urine oxalate. Because as always, kidney stone nutrition is not straightforward. There's so much more to it, so much more than oxalate, and it is not about totally avoiding one food or totally eating the other. It's about looking at your whole pattern and making sure everything is in balance, because honestly, that's when I really see people get into trouble, is when things become unbalanced, like that super high oxalate intake that I mentioned earlier, with like tons of spinach smoothies and tons of dark chocolate or tons of almonds or whatever it is. Yeah, that's when we get into problems. Another example might be if someone is going completely vegan, but they have completely forgotten about the importance of calcium and making sure they're incorporating some plant food sources of calcium. Yeah, then we get into trouble. The other thing is like a keto diet, right? That is especially a very meat-centric keto diet. If you totally take out fruits and vegetables and you're just eating meat all the time, that gets you out of balance, and that can cause stones in susceptible people. Obviously, not everyone is going to form a kidney stone on a keto diet or on a vegan diet, but these things do put you at higher risk if you aren't balancing things and looking at that urine test and making sure you are getting everything that you need, basically. So with that, I will close this chocolate episode for episode 4 of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I hope that was helpful and helps you add a little bit more chocolate to your life, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.